Roadkill. Aaron knew his Grampy loved him because he took him to every single hockey match and practice. Often, by the time he'd dropped him home, Granny would already be asleep, either in bed with her teeth out, or in front of a roaring television with cold tea and a packet of ginger nuts on a coffee table. Granny worried a lot. When they were out watching a match, if Grampy had a beer or two, then got in the car, Aaron was in on his secret. Don't tell your Gran, she'll only get her knickers in a twist. And those are some big knickers these days, believe me, boy. Aaron looked over at Grampy in the driving seat. He was mostly bald, with thin white wisps of hair at the side blowing in the breeze from the open window. But with his shirt sleeves rolled up, you could see his forearms were still powerful, circled by thick veins. He was gripping the wheel, scowling at a mother slowly pushing a buggy laden with shopping across the zebra, humming along with the radio through his nose. Aaron loved the way Grampy roared whenever he got close to the goal. He loved gliding across the ice knowing Grampy was watching and maybe shouting his name. Like he's won the pools, Granny said. It was the same if Cardiff City ever scored, which they hardly did these days. Next to Robert Earnshaw, Aaron was Grampy's man. And he felt like a man in all that bulky kit. Grampy had bought it for him, because Mum hadn't been able to afford extras since she had the baby, got sick and had to quit work. But at some point, Grampy was going to notice that Aaron didn't ever talk about girls or bring girls home. He never would. Aaron tried to pass his silence off as manly reserve, respect for the ladies, because Grampy wouldn't feel the same about him once he knew. The first time Aaron realised this, for sure, was at a wedding. Grampy, pissed out of his mind, sat at the bar, moaning to the father of the bride that Granny wasn't interested in all that anymore. Grampy was leaning in to whisper, but you could hear him from halfway across the room anyway. There was something about the other man listening with half a smile, half embarrassment. The way he listened with interest while glancing over Grampy's shoulder for his wife to rescue him. Aaron knew it then, a feeling in his stomach like hunger. Grampy couldn't love him the same way forever. He was just riding things out really, until Grampy noticed something was not right with him. In darker moments, Aaron even wondered if he might just keep pretending till Grampy was dead. But then he always felt bad, straight away, for wishing death on the old man. They weren't driving to practice this morning, just popping to Tesco for Granny so she could have a rest. She was happy at home in her chair with her crisp sandwich, wearing loose trousers and one of Aaron's baggy Metallica t-shirts, watching a Bruce Willis film. Aaron and Granny both liked those kind of films. She'd asked him to stay and keep her company, but he went with Grampy. Gran still treated him like he was 7 most of the time, cutting off his crusts and calling him a chickadee. Grampy was accelerating. He was content. A generous man, out food shopping with his boy, giving the wife a rest. He was telling a story, maybe half made up, or all made up, about when he worked on the Cardiff docks after the war. They'd pulled out the corpse of a pilot still inside his wreck, slumped over as if he was sleeping, with the flesh rotting and falling off, clumps of yellow hair sticking to the skull. Grampy said he reached in and took the smashed German watch for himself. He said when he touched the flesh it felt like soggy pudding. Said he kept the watch for years in a drawer, a reminder that nothing lasts forever. Learn to fly while you still have time, boy. Granny had thrown the watch away before Aaron was born. He glanced over at his grandson to see if the boy was listening. Grampy wasn't watching the road when the dog ran out. It came from behind a car. Aaron saw it and thought Grampy was about to slow down. Aaron said, "Look out!" Grampy turned back to the road but kept going. There was a heavy thud. The dog squealed. The car jolted and sped up. The dog was knocked sideways. It rolled a few times on the verge, picked itself up and limped off. It was a big black dog. Aaron was twisting about under his seatbelt, straining to see it. Grampy didn't even look back. Aaron shouted that he'd told him about the dog. He was wondering if Grampy thought the dog would get across before the car hit it, but that was being generous. Grampy didn't even slow down. He didn't care if the dog was all right, or if there was some little kid at home waiting for the dog, maybe just behind the dog, watching everything, about to run out himself. There was a pause while Aaron waited for Grampy to reply, but he didn't. Aaron felt the inside of the car was far away. The buildings, shops and trees moving past the window were blurry and unreal, like a music video or something. He was staring at his hands, thinking about Grampy and Granny and their 3 daughters, all the people they had created with all those fingers, 30 altogether including thumbs. He touched his face. His fingers were cold. He wanted to shout and kick like when he was little over at Granny's, but he waited to give Grampy a chance to say something. Stop the car and wonder if the dog was okay, drive back to pick it up and call the number on the collar, get it to a vet, but nothing changed. Only the noise of the radio and Grampy clearing his throat. Then Grampy said, "I think I'll buy your Granny something nice while we're at the shops. It's nearly her birthday. She was born in March, like a lamb. I never used to remember. She was such a beautiful girl, your Granny. Blonde hair and a film star figure. And never too in love with herself. Some of these young girls, they think they're chocolate, if you know what I mean. Not Gran." Aaron looked at him, wanting to ask, "What's the matter with you? What about the dog? Are you blind?" But he couldn't face hearing any excuses. He opened his mouth to say something about something else. Then, by accident, he called his grandfather a bastard, a stupid bastard, and started crying. His head was aching and his cheeks were burning. He put his cold fingers over his eyes and turned away, leaning his forehead against the window. Grampy didn't say anything. They drove past the school and the traffic lights. Grampy indicated and swung into the Tesco's parking lot. With the engine off, Aaron's crying was much louder. He hated himself for crying. He felt like a big ugly mess no one wanted to scrape up. He wanted to say that to Grampy, but he knew it would sound self-pitying and weak. He wanted to calmly get out of the car and walk all the way back to Mum's. He wanted to look the old man in the eye, knowing he was the better person. He also wanted to stay in the car, in case Grampy was sorry or had a good reason, or came to his senses and suggested they turn back and try to help the dog. But Grampy didn't say anything. He took the keys out of the ignition and patted the boy on the shoulder, more gently than usual, like he might be sorry. That night, Aaron dreamt of the dead dog. It was being raised from the sea by some kind of gigantic JCB, head lolling about. Its vicious white jaws were exposed by the rotted red flesh of the lips. There was a gold chain sparkling around its stinking black, wet, furry neck, but Aaron was too scared to touch the dead thing and take it. In another episode of his dream, Grampy was dead, lying on the same road where they had hit the dog. Aaron was stretched out next to him, face down on the tarmac, sobbing his guts out. When he woke up in the morning, he knew for sure that he didn't want his Grampy to die. Not yet. He loved the old man. But he also knew he had to try to be more honest.